Hello everyone, thanks for coming back. Right, obviously a lot has gone on between now and last time with the vaccine that's come out. But before I talk about the vaccine, I just want to bring a few things to light, put a bit of context around it. Now, there was a professor of economics by the name of Genevieve Briand who did a report on all deaths using US official data at the CDC from, I think it was February, not March, February to September. And obviously what she was doing was comparing all deaths to previous years. That's how you see what's going on. So what you would expect to see then would be, deaths are relatively the same really over the years. Heart disease, cancer are the top two. So you'd expect to see those, and then a massive spike in a new disease. If they're telling us this is a new disease and it's so virulent, it's infecting everybody, then there would be a spike. But what she found was there was no spike of any actual deaths, but when she looked into it, basically heart disease and flu and pneumonia have disappeared. They've all disappeared. But COVID has gone through the roof, according to the statistics. There's no extra deaths, there's a misproportion of statistics. And to back this up, there's a similar case here in Wales. So I'm just going to, because I don't want to get these stats wrong. So on the NHS between March and June, and they were the times, that we were told this was really, really doing damage between those times. So in England and Wales, anyone with pre-existing conditions, there were 45,859 deaths. Wales, out of that figure, 2,156, which works out at 0.7% of the Welsh population. Non-pre-existing conditions between England and Wales, 4,476. Out of that, 294 were Wales. That's 0.094% of the Welsh population. So we're not seeing any new disease. There's no evidence of that at all, even with the statistics, even without them. If there was a pandemic, we would know about it. We would certainly know about it. Before I move on to a couple of studies which are important, I just want to quickly talk about the PCR test, because this is the part and parcel of where we are. Because they're justifying the lockdowns because there's been a massive increase in cases. Well, of course, if you're going to keep testing people, the cases are going to go through the roof. But the inventor of the PCR test was Dr. Kary Mullis, and he invented it in 1983. Now, it was never created to be a diagnostic tool. It's an amplification tool. And it's brilliant at what it does, but what it's being used for at the moment is being misinterpreted as seeing something else. Because all the PCR test does is amplify whatever you're looking at. Well, none of us are short of genetic material as living human beings, which is why a fruit and a goat tested positive. It's living material. None of us are short of genetic material, I can assure you. Now, he stated that 35 cycles of this test would be about right. Any more cycles amplifying from there, you are going to bring up false positives. Well, the NHS have been amplifying this test at 45 cycles. This is why it's producing a very high number of false positives in asymptomatic people. Asymptomatic just means you are healthy. That's all it means. That is all it means, but they need to put a fear into everyone. So by saying that you're asymptomatic and that you're some kind of super spreader, then, it puts the fear in you to go and get tested. So he said himself, and he figured this out when they used it incorrectly for HIV. Because in order to use the PCR test, you need to isolate the virus first. You can't do it otherwise you don't know what you're looking at. That's the number one thing for the PCR. So I'm going to move on now. So we know that most of them are false positives anyways, like a 90. And if you amplify it enough, everyone will test positive. Absolutely everyone. You're just amplifying genetic material. And if you've ever had a cold, which is a coronavirus, you are likely to test positive because you've had the cold that's in your body. So before I go on to the vaccine, I just want to point out some other things with some studies that I've been looking at, which are actually really vitally important to this whole thing. Many of you probably already know, but some of you probably won't. So the first study was from the CDC, and basically it brought up two problems. Well, I say problems, it just brought up two things that were very interesting. The first one is how they sequence the virus. Now, if there's a real virus out there, you'd be able to find it, you'd be able to sequence it end to end in a laboratory and say that that's what's causing the illness. But in this case, this virus is supposed to have 30,000 base pairs, and all they had from living tissue was 37 out of 30,000. The rest of it came from a digital viral sequence bank in China. So basically we're talking a computer 99% more of it computer generated virus. Right, that's vital to understand, because it's only done with a small bit of tissue. So it wasn't sequenced end to end with living tissue for a start. And this is what they're actually using. But the second thing, and this is the important bit, is that they tested it. They tested this SARS-CoV-2, the computer-generated virus, on 3 types of human tissue. Human adenocarcinoma, which is basically a malignant tumour, human liver cells, and human embryonic kidney cells. And to do this, they inoculated a very high dose of the SARS-CoV-2 into the tissue, and then they waited 24 hours. And after 24 hours, they found there was no cytopathic effect. And all that means is structural changes caused by viral invasion to your cells. None of it. So basically it cannot replicate, meaning it's non-infectious to humans. The other thing they did, and this is the kicker, they told us that this virus started because somebody in China ate a bat. So they tried to infect bat cell lines with this SARS-CoV-2 that came from the computer-generated virus for replication capacity, and it couldn't infect the bat either. So we're talking about something here that's absolutely zero proof, scientifically or otherwise, that a virus even exists. There was another study that backed up the first part of the sequence coming from the lab in China, and that was done. There's basically 22 scientists who were asking for this study to be redacted immediately, down to 10 fatal errors and 4 minor ones. One of them is Dr. Kevin Corbett. And this study where they said they detected the virus was called Detection of 2019 Novel Coronavirus by Real-Time PCR. We've already spoken about the PCR, but this is the study that they're all using as a control. So this study was done within 24 hours, completely skipping peer review. That's unheard of, and this is why doctors are starting to speak out about this. Usually takes months to peer review. So, and it went through all, basically within 24 hours, and the PCR was accepted as the gold standard, right? And this is what everyone else is using. This is actually a quote from the study. We aimed to develop and deploy robust diagnostic methodology for use in public health laboratory settings without having virus material available. Without having virus material available. This is another quote from a study in Wuhan, no less. Virus cultures were negative for all asymptomatic positive cases, indicating no viable virus in positive cases detected in this study. They're actually telling us here, so if there's no virus that's been isolated or purified or even detected at this point, what on earth is in the vaccine? Because if you know how a vaccine is supposed to work, It's basically, you put a small amount of the virus, or a weakened amount of the virus into the vaccine, your body produces an antibody response, so it recognises it next time. That's how it's supposed to work, right? Okay, so where's the virus? It's not in the vaccine. It's not in the vaccine, but there are other things in the vaccine. The other thing to note as well is Koch postulates. Now, they're the gold standard for producing whether a microorganism causes disease. Although you could argue the point with this one, because viruses they're dead, they need a guiding agent, they need a host. So, but you know, people have spoken about those. Sorry. Right then, so Pfizer. We've heard even more about Pfizer. Oh, dear me. Never mind, just leave them there, all right. Right, sorry about that. Right, last time I was here I spoke a bit about Pfizer and about their track record, you know, all the billions and billions they paid out in fines for mispromoting medicines and hiking prices and paying doctors, supplying doctors kickbacks for prescribing dangerous medication for people that didn't need it, and you know, it just, the list goes on and on and on. I won't repeat myself. But this is the same for every single pharmaceutical company out there, to be honest. They're so powerful, they can afford these fines. But there's something else that Pfizer haven't bothered to tell us about this vaccine in particular. Now, it takes between 10 to 15 years to develop a vaccine. Right? We know this is obviously less than a year for a start. They're not bothering to release any of their data for independent scrutiny for 2 years. They've not tested it on children. They've not tested it for infertility. And there are vaccines that do cause that, which is why Bill Gates has had such a time in the third world, where he sterilised most of them. Gardasil also does the same. The HPV shot causes premature ovarian failure. So just, you know, it says on the box. So they haven't tested for that. And the most alarming one to me really was that they haven't bothered testing anyone on medication. Well, it's about 80% of the population, isn't it, at the moment? They're not testing it, and they said they're not giving any of their data. You know, they're a bit, would you really trust these? After their track record, would you trust them? Well, let's go on to the AstraZeneca vaccine. Now, this was the one that had the trials back in the summer, the Oxford trials, where 2 of them, at least 2, had severe side effects. One of those side effects was transverse myelitis. Transverse myelitis is inflammation of the spinal cord, which is polio. Also, on this box, if you've read it, you might have seen the video going around of the actual AstraZeneca box and what it says on there. Well, it states it's a recombinant vaccine, so that's DNA structures basically made in a lab, pulled from all different sources of genetic material that are not normally found in the human genome. And because it's an mRNA vaccine, a messenger vaccine, it's specific to change your DNA. That's what recombinant means. But next to it, in brackets, they do this. They don't tell you exactly what's in it because it would frighten people. They give you code. So on the box, I think it says Chad OX1-S or something like that. But if you Google that, it's MRC5. If you Google what MRC5 is, it's the lung tissue of a 14-week-old male aborted fetus. And wherever you see WI-38, it's exactly the same, but a female. There's aborted human tissue. They've even told you that on the box. You know, do you really want this to go in? This is an untested, unlicensed. They face no liability when things go wrong. And I just want to say as well, on the MHRA, which is our equivalent of the FDA, obviously they are regulators. And on their website it states that they're urgently seeking an artificial intelligence software tool to process the high level of ADRs they're going to be receiving from this vaccine. ADR is an adverse drug reaction. So they're even telling you on their regulatory, their website, this is absolutely insane. And they also state that they can, under a pandemic situation, they're able to use unlicensed medications. This is what they're doing. okay? But we're not in a pandemic situation, are we? Not only can we see it, it's blatant, it even states it on the government website, and it has done since the 19th of March, where they downgraded it from a high consequence infectious disease. What they had to do, to be able to write the COVID Act, they had to initiate the Public Health Act 1984. So they put it into a pandemic situation, initiated the Act, then reduced it from from a high consequence infectious disease, and then wrote the COVID Act 6 days later. We know we're not in a pandemic situation, and that is your defence. It says it on their website. The other thing is, I just want to talk about at the end of this now, is what's gone on the last week. Right, so we've got Australia now saying they're pulling out of it. They're pulling out of it because apparently it's causing false HIV positives. I just recently heard as well, there's a number of doctor surgeries in England who have come together. It's between them, I think they've got 100,000 patients that they don't want to do the vaccine in their surgeries either, which is really good news, really good news. That's brilliant, brilliant. And I hope you follow suit. You would have seen it, half-an-hour video of just doctor after doctor after doctor telling you why this vaccine is not safe or effective. And when they say effective, I just got to, because most people's assumption when people say a vaccine is effective is that it's effective in keeping you from the disease that you're vaccinated for. That's not what it means in clinical terms. It means it's effective in producing an antibody response, which it will do because you've just been assaulted in your bloodstream with foreign matter, foreign debris and neurotoxins and carcinogens. So you're obviously going to produce an antibody response. Your body's being attacked. That's all it means. We've got 4 with Bell's palsy, which is paralysis of the face. They had 6 that died, but they said it's all right, because 4 of them were the placebo. Let me tell you something about how they do their vaccine trials and testing. A placebo should be a saline solution. It should be water. When they do their vaccine trials, they use another vaccine for their placebo. So in other words, 6 people did die from being vaccinated. We've got, what else was it? So we got the 3 with anaphylactic shock. 2 of them were NHS workers, I believe. And I can tell you something now, the 2 people that they had on telly, Margaret Keenan and William Shakespeare of all people, right, theatre. Even if that's a real scenario, I can guarantee you they would never have risked giving a real vaccine live on TV because they do not know who's going to have anaphylactic shock from it. And that'd be the last thing people would, can you imagine, live on telly, someone has anaphylactic, they're not going to do it. They would have had a saline. They would have had one. The other thing I want to do as well, because obviously I've spoken about the virus not being isolated. I hope I haven't confused anyone, but this is vital because the PCR test is the one that's dictating our lives for us right now. And they've set up all these testing centres all over the place and people are actually testing. This is the fault. The more tests you do, you've got no symptoms, you're going to get a test, you're going to ramp those numbers up and they're going to put us in lockdown. It's nothing to do with us out here, where we get the blame for it, obviously. But it's the people who are tested, who are getting tested all the time. They're driving the numbers up, which is causing this. And we know those tests I say bunk, they're not bunk, but they are for this reason. They're not being used as they were supposed to be used. And had Carrie Mullis been alive today, he would have been the first person, wouldn't he, that they would have gone to, and he would have been the first person to say, no, you can't use the PCR test for that reason, which makes me very suspicious, by the way, why he died last year. Poor guy, he was an amazing scientist. I just want to leave on a few recommendations, because to figure out where this is going, they're always going to use this germ lie until we realise what it is. They did it with Ebola, they did it with swine flu, they've done it with all of them. Because when we don't understand what it is, we're going to be scared by it. And they will keep using the same thing. If this goes away and we still don't understand the germ and the terrain theory, they're going to have us again with another virus. So I'm just going to leave you with a few recommendations. I can't stress enough. I will do a video on viruses, I just haven't got the time to talk about it now. I'll do it on my own wall when I'm allowed back on Facebook, because I'm banned again. It's something like the millionth time this year. So I'll do that. But the recommendations is 3 great books: Goodbye Germ Theory, Virus Mania, The Poison Needle, research Dr. Andrew Kaufman, Dr. Andrew Molden, Dr. Stefan Lanker, and Dr. Peter Duisberg. And I have another look into Dr. Kerry Mullis, there's a lot on him as well. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening to me. I look forward to the rest of the day.